If you don't mind, please find your seats so we can go ahead and get started. I don't like it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Well, I tell you what, we act like we haven't seen each other in a year. Or a year and a half. How's that? So let's go ahead and get started. I tell you what, some of y'all know me, some of you don't. I've always, believe it or not, struggled with public speaking. It took me years. In fact, I didn't start speaking until I was about 52 years old. But I will tell you, this is probably about the happiest I've ever been speaking, because I get to speak to people again and not a screen. And we had a Zoom meeting today. There was half the people in the office, half was on the Zoom, and I got to tell you, it's just not the same when you can actually make eye contact with people and carry on a conversation and really know how people feel when they're talking to you. So I'm about the happiest I've been ever standing behind a lectern. I can tell you that right now. Believe it or not, the last in-person membership meeting that we had was in the second week of March last year in this room. And a guy named Patrick Jankowski from the Greater Houston Partnership was speaking about the economy, and how it was going to be a boom year and things were going to be going great. And he spoke for about 40 minutes. And about the last 5 minutes of this conversation, he said, we got this COVID thing going around. We don't really know what it's going to happen. We don't think it's going to affect the economy. We don't think it's really going to affect us. And he said, in fact, he says, I'm going on a cruise in 3 weeks and nothing's going to stop me. Well, he called me and said, I didn't go on a cruise. So with that said, again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. We do have some that were live feeding this, and we do have some of our friends that are watching this from home or their office. So I want to thank them as well. We got a long list of elected officials today that I'm going to mention, and believe it or not, I missed this part of it too. So anyway, so first of all, Jay Guerrero with U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Jay, thank you. And most of y'all know me. I normally wait till I'm done, but in today's case, we're just going to go ahead and clap. Okay, so Jason Fuller with U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Kelly Waterman with Congressman Brian Babin. Jared Vargas with Congressman Randy Weber. State Representative Dennis Paul. And Faye Picard with Dr. Greg Bonin. And before I move past them, I'm going to send a personal message to Dennis, and Faye, I want you to send a personal message to Greg and tell them I can't thank them enough for the work that they did in this session and how they helped this community. And of course, I can't leave Larry Taylor out either, but Dennis and Greg were right behind Larry, leading the charge on several things. One, the Gulf Coast Protection District. And not only did we get that created that we had to have for a non-federal sponsor for the Ike Dike and the Coastal Spine, but they added $200 million to that. So I want to thank them a bunch for that. I want to thank Dennis. And of course, I want to thank Greg for all their work on the Texas Aerospace Scholars Program, the Technology Outreach Program. They bumped that up for us for the next biennium. Thank you for that. And last but not least, the Spaceport Trust Fund. Dennis, thank you so much for your work on putting $15 million in the Spaceport Trust Fund. Okay, from Harris County, Tanya McCaney Rivera. I don't think I've seen her, but she was on our list. I want to thank her for being here from Precinct 2. Commissioner Adrian Garcia, as well as Doug Peterson from Commissioner Garcia's office. Mayor Mike Foreman from the city of Friendswood. We have Mayor Chris Arnacost from Hitchcock. And I'm proud to announce that Hitchcock is just this week organization. So I want to thank them for that. Well, Mayor Pro Tem Dave Martin was supposed to be here, so I will certainly give him a hard time if he doesn't make it. But he was supposed to be sitting at the table with us. Mayor Carl Joyner from Kemah. Council Member Brent McCauley from the city of LaPorte. Morgan's Point, Mayor Michelle Bechtel. And Council Member Paul Francis. A little comment about Mayor Michelle Bechtel. I can't thank him enough for helping on everything that's been going on with the coastal spine. He and I have kind of been stuck at the hip together for about 2.5, 3 years now, and he has just been wonderful to help us with this. Everything that's been being accomplished on that coastal spine. Could not have done it without with Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Seabrook Councilmember Ed Klein. Taylor Lake Village, Councilmember John Powell. And of course, I really need to thank our real dear friend, and Darren Hall has been a friend of this organization, a friend of mine for, oh gosh, 15, 17 years now. Long enough. Darren, thanks you for sponsoring the event tonight for United Airlines. And I have a long list of new members. We have had a heck of a year so far this year. So bear with me just for a few minutes with this. First, I want to mention ASRC Federal, Jeannie Krantz, Senior Director, NASA Business Development Strategy. Jeannie, thank you. I want to mention Axiom Space. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to make it today or not, but Axiom Space. New members, Burns and McDonald, Parker Gregg, Business Development Director. Lighthouse Video Surveillance, Danny Myers. Sandler Training, Brad Fryer. SSAI, Amy Spradlin. Wild Interest, Randy Weil. I do want to mention the city of Hitchcock. I also want to mention the city of Santa Fe that voted this week to join the organization as well. So we're excited about that. Now, this one's going to be a little bit of a struggle. We practiced this before the meeting started, okay? So we have a new member, Felice's Property, Raven and Saromi Vijay Singha. Did I get it right? Thank you. Thank you. Once again, I want to thank y'all for being here. Right now, I'd like for Charlie Stegenmiller to come up, our 2021 chairman, and let him introduce our speaker today. Thank you.
Wow, it's a great day to be alive in person in Houston, Texas. So glad to see all of y'all here today. And before I begin with my remarks, Bob Mitchell's done an awesome job for all of us since last year. Thank you, Bob. I encourage you to take a moment to read about our guest speaker. And you think about the things that we've gone through, and you just think about the most recent announcements of the opportunities generated around this in the last year, and you can thank the man that's going to come speak to us. His boundless energy, his enthusiasm, his foresight, his engagement has really made a difference for all of us in this community and in this region. And I encourage you to take a moment. But I did have the opportunity yesterday to chat with him briefly. Lead up to so his first aviation experience, his brother was a pilot flying F-102. So he had this interest, and he saw he saw himself as being a pilot. Sought that pathway. Commercial pilot became a little outside of his reach, but he got engaged and was passionate about it, became a pilot himself. And in his studies, he studied math. Well, how does math play into this? Well, he was introduced to the concept of infinity. Well, infinity can't be solved terrestrially. You have to go out into space to solve infinity. So with all of the turning chaos into opportunity that's been around us in this last year, especially for those of us in the aerospace business, I want to introduce you to my personal new real-life image of Buzz Lightyear. To infinity and beyond, Mr. Mario Diaz.
Well, Charlie, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thanks to all of you for being here this afternoon. I am really delighted to just stand here this afternoon and have a dialogue with you really about what it is we're doing at the Houston Spaceport, one of the 3 airports of the Houston airport system. But before I get into that, I want to make sure that if you have the deluded idea that had anything to do with this, I really want to make sure that you understand the team. I always said, and many of you that I've spoken to will always hear this from me, is that we have to learn to hunt as a pack. It's a kind of a primitive idea, but it works when you're really thinking about focusing and everyone has a position in place when you're taking down big games. And we are interested in taking down big games, big corporations, bringing them to Houston, bringing them to Bayport, bringing them to the Houston Spaceport. And as a result of what we've been able to accomplish, again, I think when just in a matter of years, you're going to see quite a few people that are going to be employed. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about where I opened the Starbucks. Because someone talked to me about a hotel. I can't do a hotel, but maybe a Starbucks I can. And I'm just going to clean up with all the people that are going to be at the spaceport and visiting the spaceport, and of course all the venues that are going to support the spaceport as well. But really, and I really do want to get back to the people. And there are some people that have been introduced, but I think that some of them need reintroduction, or at least to be pulled in with a connection to the spaceport. Now, I have to start off again by Bob Mitchell, president of Bay Hangar. He's really been a phenomenal early adopter, as I would call him, supporter from the start. And of course, Dan Thiel, who's been with us for a large part of the time. Of course, our own council member, Dave Martin. Did you say he was here? All right, okay, we'll look for him. And then from my staff, Saba Abashal and Tim Jonick in the back, and Arturo Machuca, who's really been the face of Spaceport. You probably all know Arturo, so thank you to all of you. And then some very, very special individuals, because as you will hear in the presentation, there is an element to this spaceport that through learning, we have come to understand can really make the difference, can provide the competitive advantage to make Houston stand out in aerospace. And that is the Houston Aerospace Training Center that we are going to be looking to put in place. I would start off by mentioning Dr. Dave Alexander from Rice University. David, thank you so much for being here. Next to him is Dr. Ira Blake of the University of Houston, Clear Lake. I understand we have Mr. Kenneth Hewitt of Texas Southern University. Mr. Hewitt, if you were here, we're working with University of Texas Southern University on this project as well. And of course, you all know her. She was the keynote speaker on many occasions, Dr. Brenda Hillier and Sally Kay of San Jacinto College. I mean, they are rock stars, and have really gotten us off to a start. And then, of course, there's Dr. Cayley, Cindy Cayley of Texas A&M. She's not here. And of course, Dr. Hillier is in Colorado. I understand, Denver, Colorado, but she sends her wishes and her regards. And it's wonderful to have such a team working all together to move this spaceport forward. So what is it we're moving? Well, before I get into that, I need to tell you a little bit. And do I have a clicker? Oh, yes, here's a clicker. I need to tell you a little bit about the Houston airport system. It never works. All right. So, and so what I like to do is I'd like to break up this talk into 4 parts. First, we've got to have some foundation, some background. Where does the spaceport fit in Ellington Airport, and where does Ellington Airport fit in the Houston airport system? So I give you a little bit of background on the airport system, and as soon as I start talking about the airport system, I start talking about Bush Intercontinental Airport and Hobby. Of course, COVID-19 pops into all of our heads, so I'll say a few words about COVID-19 and what we're doing, or what we have done, and how we're getting through it. And I'm sure you all, if you're in the hospitality business, will want to know what's going on with the passengers flying. It's good news, tremendously good news. Then I want to get into the spaceport itself and share a little bit of, thank you so much. So get into a little bit about the spaceport itself. Where did this idea come from? How are we developing it? And what are we doing? And this is really the kernel, the meat of this discussion. And then I really want to talk to you about, the last thing is about this training center. Because I really think that's important. And I really think that any of you that are in aerospace or aviation, if you're in business, if you're part of a larger corporation, I really urge you to support the training center. It's called the Egg Center. And Sally Kay is here. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to get together, if you need training for in aviation or in aerospace, Sally Kay is here, start us off. And then of course, we'll build on this as we go forward. So a little bit about the Houston airport system. And it is that we have a philosophy. And that philosophy is captured in 2 themes. First is the mission for the airport system and the vision. And the mission is really simple. We started off when I first got here to say, so why does the Department of Aviation in the city exist? What is it that we do that's different from all the rest? What is it that we contribute to society, to the economy, to the fabric of this great region? And it is simple. We exist to connect the people, the businesses, the cultures, and the economies of the world to Houston. Not Houston to the world, but the world to Houston. Houston is the center. And we're pulling people in. And that's a different perspective. The second is, all right, so what are you going to do with that? And it is to create a 5-star global air service gateway where the magic of flight is celebrated. People want to have fun. People want to feel good when they walk to our airport systems or they engage with our organization. And that's very important because if people enjoy the trip, the experience through the airports, if it works for them, if they feel they find value, they'll find value in the city. They'll find value in everything that we do. And let's remember that as a CEO, if you have a good experience in an airport, you say to yourself, this is a pretty well-run city. It's a pretty well-run region. I think that mine can be supported. You know what? I think I'm going to open a plant, or I'm going to open a regional design, or to open a business center. Maybe I'll move my regional or national or international headquarters here. That's the whole idea. That's in the shell, the purpose for economic development of what we're engaged in to do. And so it's really important. But the airport system itself consists of 3 airports, as many of you know: George Bush Intercontinental Airport, William P. Hobby, and Ellington. And each one of them plays a very strategic role in the airport system. So for example, George Bush Intercontinental is a long haul for full service intercontinental airport that connects the world to Houston. We have nonstop service from every inhabited continent in the world to Houston. Penguins don't count. And that's important because direct nonstop, and by direct nonstop, I mean all the way down to Auckland, New Zealand, and Sydney, Australia. If you want to take a space flight, but you don't want to go into space, go down there and sit on an airplane for 17 hours. Get suited up because you'll need it. But I mean, these flights are really getting long. And as these aircraft advance, and the more hang time, as it's called, you have the more destinations you can reach on the Earth nonstop. And that'll be very, very important. Hobby is a regional international airport of the Americas. And it's simply that because of the length of runways that Hobby has, we find it's good for the type of aircraft. These are narrow body, not wide body, narrow body aircraft that can lift off those runways, and they can make it all the way down to the northern tier of Latin America. They can cover all of Central America and the Caribbean, as far down as Lima, Peru. And as more and more advances are made in aircraft, now you have the 737 MAX. You can make it down to Lima in the 737. It's a question of how much time you want to spend in a 737, right? You know, you don't want to more than 6 or 7 hours in a 737. You have to start adding a little bit of convenience to that. But it is an alternative to this part of the region. It doesn't necessarily want to travel. All due respect to our friends from United, to Intercontinental, to fly to Latin America or the Caribbean and point south. And then, of course, we've got Ellington. And Ellington today, or was until recently, a general aviation / military airport. And I'll tell you a little bit about Ellington in a minute. But the point about Ellington is that when we first started thinking, my senior staff and I started thinking about Ellington and trying to figure out what to do with it, we realized that if you look at Ellington in the context of where it sits, and you look around and you see you have NASA, you have all of these aerospace companies, and then you realize that Houston is Space City, USA. But what is space about it? We're not a vertically integrated city in the sense that, like, and I won't mention the name of the city, but it's in Alabama. They build rockets, and they build rocket engines, and they build avionics, and they build all kinds of physical equipment that actually goes into space. That's about to change. That is about to change. We're getting into that business here. We're going to start manufacturing components. We're not just going to track them on radar or track them through NASA. We're simply not going to watch these units, these space probes. We're not simply going to take a look at the modules that are being lifted off and making connections to the International Space Center. We're going to build them here and then launch them. And that's really going to make a difference. We have some priorities as we start thinking about our strategic plan and what we're going to focus on. And of course, one of the most important, again, consistent and in alignment with 5 stars, is make the passenger happy. And so you'll see the pyramid on the left-hand side of the screen. And this was something that I found in the office of the Chief Executive Officer of Changi Airport in Singapore. I don't know if any of you have been to Singapore. It's a beautiful, beautiful. I mean, it is the world's best airport, hands down. Airports just don't come close. Whenever you think about what you want to be when you grow up as an airport, you always think about Changi. And in the back, behind the Chief Executive Officer, we were having a discussion in his office. There's this triangle, kind of like the Maslow triangle. I said, what's that? It looked like Maslow's triangle of human needs. He goes, no. it is the airport triangle of passenger needs. Well, explain it to me. And he says, well, you know what you need to do? The very first thing, no one is going to come to your airport if they don't feel safe. COVID-19, reminder. I mean, starkly over this past year, I've gotten to know what that bottom means. And it's not just terrorists, it's not just, faulty equipment or missed things that don't function. It also has to do with how comfortable you feel in the environment. And then you've got to provide for the capacity. You've got to constantly think about planning ahead. How many more gates you're going to need, when you're going to need them, what kind of gates you're going to need, where you're going to fly. And of course, we've got at Intercontinental, the $1.3 billion international redevelopment program underway. And by the way, by the end of next year, December of next year, we will be opening the D-West Pier. 6 brand new wide body international gates. And I can assure you, it is going to be beautiful. I think this region is going to be extremely proud of the design and the space that's going to be created at Intercontinental. And then we've got the domestic redevelopment program going on. I've got to give credit to our friends with United. United is making a ton of investment, literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in projects like an early bag storage. Because I get a sense, I don't know, but I get a sense that United is going to start pumping a lot of traffic through Houston very, very soon. And we're really very happy about that. Darren, thank you so much for that. We have to be environmentally responsible. I mean, I think that's something that's given. We have to act responsibly to establish social, economic, and environmental sustainability. We have to. And if you think that that's far-fetched, just think about the past week, the 2 actions that have been taken around the world. I think they kind of sent shock to at least the energy industry. When first in the Netherlands, the courts in The Hague, in the Netherlands, ruled against Shell, requiring them, I think, to basically meet a certain sustainability goal by 2030 or something like year. I mean, here's a court requiring a company to do something. And then, of course, here in Houston, ExxonMobil and the board discussion that they had and the new board members that they're bringing on board. The world is taking sustainability, environmental sustainability seriously. But how about economic sustainability? We need economic sustainability, and we need to make sure that we guide our organizations in such a way that we don't think about competition as just beating someone. Fine. There are organizations around that we look at and we say, those are very, very good airports, but we're not going to compete against them. We're going to look at them as rivals. We say they do a lot of good things, but we do a lot of good things. Let's learn from them and let's make organizations better tomorrow than it is today. And then of course you've got social responsibility. And yes, I do believe that we're responsible for economic development, job creation. That's part of it. That's part of the job. It's part of what we do. Building the platforms for success. ITRO, Spaceport, domestic redevelopment, building the capacity. You know, this city is now, I understand, north of 7.2 million people and growing. It's big, and it's going to continue to grow. And we've got to stay ahead of that curve by making sure that we provide the capacity. And by the way, there are more and more airlines that are going to want to come in. There are more airlines that are expanding. As some of you have heard that recently, Southwest also opened some gates at Intercontinental. Spirit is growing in terms of low cost. I've mentioned United. This is all great for the city because connections make the difference. Connections. And people say, well, in this world of Teams meeting and Zoom, no more connections. You don't need that anymore. Well, I'm not ready to say that that's correct. When you do deals, you really want to sit across the table from whomever you're talking to, negotiating with, and shake hands, look that person in the eye, and agree on something. If you want to sell something, it's kind of hard doing it when you're trying to manage the technology and you're showing them the product and the product doesn't work because the technology doesn't work. Conferences. Can you imagine attending a conference virtually and you're watching as everyone is having fun, having a glass of wine, and you're sitting in your home? What's that about? Right? That's no good. That's not going to happen. People want to fly. They're going to want to fly. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then invest in our partnerships and our employees. The one thing that I definitely have learned recently is that if you're going to grow your organization, you got to invest in your employees. You got to make sure that they're well trained. They understand what the objectives are. They're aligned. And there is a culture that is supportive of them to go forward. And we do that with our partnerships as well. And so that's really the important part of it. So let's turn to COVID-19 for a moment and talk a little about what happened with COVID-19. And as with just about every other business in the world, with some exceptions, some significant exceptions, but for the most part, we had a significant, serious drop in traffic. At one point, we were down 95%. That is, we were only carrying 5% of the traffic that we had handled in 2019. International traffic at both airports together account for about 20%, dead, zero. As a matter of fact, even today, the only meaningful international traffic that we have at both airports is traffic to Mexico. I mean, 67%. The rest, it's a flight here, it's a flight there. And what's interesting is, I'll mention in a little bit, is that you have, of course, COVID-19. Yes, that's right. And you have the problem of vaccination, but then you have the political atmosphere as well. As you know, travel between countries is governed by bilateral agreements, and certainly that is the case with aviation. I mean, there's one concept called open skies, and the world aviation industry had made tremendous strides in reaching the point where an airline from the United States could fly to a country, to any city in that country, without making application for the permission to land here or permission to land there, and how many flights you can have, and what size aircraft, and on what days of the week, day or night. And we had made tremendous progress. All of that is now back in jeopardy. It is being called back into question. There will be discussions again, certainly as we think about reopening the economy. Leisure versus business. Believe it or not, Darren and I were just having a chat about this. For the months of June and July, we are actually following forward bookings of airlines that indicate we will be at 110% of the traffic we were carrying in 2019. And in 2019, we did 60 million passengers, 30 million enplanements. Now, we recognize that that is just pent up. You know, I was supposed to take 2 vacations last year, and I got 1 this year. So I got 3 vacations to make up. You know, let's get started and let's get on these vacations. I think that's a lot of this. So it'll fade over time. And then, but the business has not returned, the business traveler. But slowly you're starting to see, as the economy starts to pick up again, as there is a need for travel by business travelers, you will see a lot of that business travel return. If we can hold the leisure travel, we can layer on the business and then bring back the international, we will be well on our way again to record numbers of passengers at the airport. But, and this is a big but, we don't see that happening anytime before 2023, probably more like 2024, to get there, to get back to a stable, sustainable level of 2019 traffic. And some of the things that we have done with respect to COVID-19, I mentioned these things with, you know, the airlines I mean, you talk about a difficult job as a CEO of an airline during the pandemic. You're simply looking for any revenue stream that you can drink from. You're looking to drop into any airport that will generate a couple of passengers. And you're constantly shifting the points from business markets to leisure markets, back to business markets, hub and spoke, or point to point. It was just, I don't know how they do it, but it must have been a very challenging. Things are starting to settle down now, but there's still a lot of unknowns out there with respect to how the airlines are now going to play their hand with respect to expansion. You know, there was a substantial contraction out of these small airports into the big hubs, and then the point to point. I can't imagine if in another outbreak that passengers are going to want to stop through Atlanta, for example, or they're going to want to stop through Denver, or they're going to want to stop through Dallas Fort Worth, making a connection because you're on the ground and you're in an environment that you're not comfortable with. So point-to-point flying may be one of the ways that that can happen. And then when you have aircraft that can take you point-to-point, because now you have the A350, the 787-9s and 10s, and you've got the 737 MAX, you've got the Airbus A220. These are long-range aircraft. They can take you point-to-point, and they can do it efficiently, effectively, and at a load capacity that is good enough. You don't have to fill a big bus or a big airplane to make it work. So those are the kinds of things, changes that are taking place. And of course, as I said, the passenger. The strategy has to be to focus on the passenger. And what that means is that you have to have an end-to-end strategy for how that passenger interfaces or interacts with the airport from the time that they step out of their taxi cab or the car or the bus or the limousine until they get onto the airplane, and from the time that they deboard the airplane all the way through getting the bags and then leaving the airport. And that means the new airport, the new state of airport will require a seamless, touchless environment. And so we will be putting in place facial comparison technologies, starting with an app that you can log into, you can join, so that your face becomes your passport, your face becomes your boarding pass, and as you move through the system, you don't need to touch anyone, touch anything. Your bags, self-bag drop-off, you put your bags in this machine, you scan your face, and it already picks up the record of the fact that you are traveling on United Airlines 259 to New York City, departing at 2 o'clock from gate C7. And you just leave your bags there and you proceed to the security checkpoint. When you get to the security checkpoint, you don't have to do anything. You're already automatically acknowledged to be a passenger, having appropriate and reason for moving through that security checkpoint. You'll go through the security checkpoint. And then what we're doing is we're devising a system that will scan your credit cards and figure out the balance that you have on them so that by the time you get on the airplane, there's zero. Right? That's coming. That's coming. I haven't gotten it yet. I got to find some really high-tech whiz kids to help us do that, but that's coming. And then to get on the airplane, all you do is show up at the podium, and instead of, a boarding pass, again, it's just your face. The doors open, and you get onto the airplane, and goodbye, and have a great time. And the same on the way back, especially on international flights, because that's something we know we need to expedite. So no more this idea that you come into the country and you need to talk to an agent, they need to ask you all kinds of questions. You simply go up to a podium, you look into the camera snaps a photograph, compares it with the records that immigration has, and you've got to be a U.S. citizen, by the way. But Canadians and others will be included eventually. But you will be able to just move right through. You get a ticket, and you go right through immigrations. They might ask you one or two questions about, did you buy extra coffee? Is that what smells in your bag, that delicious aroma? Or, you know, are you carrying anything that they should know about? If not, just welcome to the United States. And you move in, you pick up your bags, no more customs down below. You just walk out the terminal and move on. So we're cutting the time that it takes to move through immigrations and customs from about, well, the ICAO standard is an international standard, about 45 minutes. We've got it down to about 30 minutes now with this new technology. So it's really important. It's making a difference. And then, of course, during the pandemic, we took it serious. And you got to remember, as the pandemic evolved, at first, the thinking was that it was a touch. So you had to wash your hands, and we had sanitizers all over the place. But then the science started to understand this was more of an airborne pathogen that was creating the havoc. And so we immediately moved and we put in high-grade filters, HEPA filters, the kind of filtration that you would see in hospitals. And we didn't go so far as putting in ultraviolet lights, but that's something that we will be certainly taking a look at with respect to any further renovations and renovations that we do in the terminals. So here it is. It's the spaceport. So as I said, the spaceport, or Ellington Airport, I should say, is the third of the 3 airports. It's not the same business. The 2 other airports are commercial passenger airports. Ellington is a military, general aviation, and now spaceport. So when we thought about it, we had a couple of themes. You might remember, some of you might remember, back in 2010, 2011, we had Embry-Riddle here. And the idea was to try to get them to build a campus. They were going to build the second, I think it was John Johnson, who was the president of Embry-Riddle at the time, came in, and we tried to talk him into building the campus here. And politics always get in the way. And there was this city called Rockford, Illinois, and they wanted Embry-Riddle as well. And so the solution was no one gets it. Embry-Riddle didn't expand. So we passed that one. And then we had, as a second theme, general aviation. We thought to ourselves, well, maybe we'll do an MRO, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul center at Ellington for these, or, you know, some kind of a super cargo hub connecting Latin American cargo with US cargo. And man, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then 2 things happened. I'm listening to the radio or TV, and our president at the time, President Barack Obama, says, the US government's credit card is tapped out for space. We don't have any more space, any more money for space. So we're going to get out of the, you know, we've done enough. The research is there. NASA has all the information, all the data. We have proven space travel is feasible, it's possible, and now private sector, take it over. Okay. And then what happened was the space shuttle, remember, was shut down. And oh my God, you remember in Houston, it was like a death sentence. 3,000 engineers, I think it was, that we've immediately had to figure out what to do with them. And we were thinking, we're at the bottom of the market. It is time to buy. It is time to invest, right? That's what we need to do. This is the time to get serious about restaking, a firm stake in the ground, and saying we're going to build Houston as truly a spaceport. I didn't know what that meant at that time. It just sounded good. But then the second thing that happened is, so I'm reading these articles about spaceports. What are these spaceports? Well, you know, they were testing facilities, test facilities, and there were some that were small companies, really fledgling companies that were starting to do some work in hypersonic speed and low Earth orbit. And we said, well, why not? Let's start with a spaceport, and here we are. So what we set off to do, we said, let's take a look at getting a license. And you know, we hired a number of consultants. We said, what's the size of this industry? It's billions. Yeah, but in what? I don't know, but it's billions. That's a good consultant. You know, it's like they tell you what you need to know and just what you need to know, no more, no less. So we said, great, it's $1 billion industry, we're in. You know, so we then went on to get we hired other consultants that helped us get the licensing. We went through the environmental review process and we were finally able to get the license. So that put us well on our way toward having a spaceport. And then we actually decided that we were going to take the southeast corner of the airport, 422 acres, and we were going to develop into a spaceport. We did the master plan for it, and we figured out the kind of investment, $21 million of investment that we needed to make in the roadways, in the sewer and storm water and potable water and power. We took the CenterPoint and we made CenterPoint understand we needed at least 10 megawatts of power. It's all brand new. Everything at the spaceport, every bit of infrastructure is brand new. And that's a very, very strong selling point to companies when you can tell them that everything in the infrastructure for your company, when you put it down, is as new as the building you will be building. And did I mention the fiber? 13 gigabytes of capacity in our fiber. That's also, if you're doing real-time work, if you're sending large files between your company and headquarters someplace else, that becomes very, very important. And then finally, we got we did the investments, we put everything in place. And today, before I get into the main event, we have two very, very important organizations that are at Arlington Spaceport today. First, we bought a building. You may remember Boeing had a building where they would build one-off kinds of things that the NASA would need. A new docking collar. Docking collar wasn't working very well, so they would give the assignment to Boeing. Boeing would, in this building, would build a new docking collar, test it, specifications, and send it out. So, I mean, this was fabrication, this was manufacturing, but it was for like one or maybe two at a time. This was not mass production at all. And so we bought that building, and in it, we installed Intuitive Machines. And I think some of you know the kinds of wonderful things that Intuitive Machines is doing, like the Nova-C module lander to go to the moon this year, January of next year. Our very own Intuitive Machine out of Houston will be one of the first to return to the moon. And some of the other things that I hear will really, I mean, just think about it. Putting a satellite into orbit. And today, people tell me it's child's play. Elon Musk does it 30 million at a time. You know, he launches a rocket and he just shoots them out, and they all immediately fall right into, you know, the perfect coordinates. He's a master at this. He doesn't, you know, he just sprinkles them all over the place. But imagine doing that around the moon. Imagine launching a communication satellite around the moon that can act as the communications network between the terrestrial moon and Earth in preparation for man to actually occupy the moon. Now that's a game changer. These are the kinds of things we need to know about. This is the kind of importance that Houston is going to be making in contribution to aerospace. And it's very, very large, very, very important. And of course, the San Jacinto Edge Center that I'll get to in a minute. Axiom. So Axiom, as some of you may know, won the contract from NASA for the last portal that was available on the International Space Station. And Axiom is now a private company that will build the modules that they will launch from Houston. I'm sorry, not from Houston, that they will build in Houston fly over to Florida. I imagine put on a Falcon 9, SpaceX Falcon 9, lifted off into the International Space Station, made a connection. And by the way, you recall maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was all this fuss in the paper about this Chinese rocket that was going to fall into Earth. And it was going to hit everybody's house and knock everything out. And we were all focused on that. Where's it going to land? Where's it going to land? But no one asked the question, what the hell was it doing in the first place in space? Do you know what it was doing? It was launching the Chinese version of their space station. That first module, 20 tons. And next year, they will be putting 2 more of these modules into space so that it'll be a 3-module component space station. And they will be allowing astronauts from all over the world, private and public, join them. So Axiom will be competing with the Chinese. That's the sum of it. And I'm betting on Axiom because they're going to be fantastic at this. Here's a layout of the building that they're going to build. So in total, they've got about 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings that they're building. They're going to start with the high bay hangar, where they will, this is what a high bay hangar will look like, where they will actually be assembling the modules that they will be putting into orbit. By the way, we had Fred Griffin in the audience here, and Fred is really helping both Axiom and the next one that you'll see, Collins, actually build these facilities. So Fred, thank you so much for helping us work out that as well. And if you want to get an idea of the comfort, just look at this. In space, 250 miles orbiting, some very, very nice serene classical music, a glass of wine as you float. Are you getting it? Vacation time coming up again. This is the kind of real experience that everyone should really dream of. It's also the madhouse if you need cushioning. So they've got you covered both ways. Construction will start in the first quarter, or I should say the fourth quarter, hopefully, of this year. And they will look to finish it in 2022. They will, they've got minority participation. But here's the thing that's most important. When finished in full operation, probably within the next 2 to 3 years, Axiom by itself will have 1,000 employees working at the spaceport. I come back to this Starbucks. I'm telling you, got to get in real soon on the Starbucks or some kind of a store or a restaurant or something, because you've got that 1,000, and keep that in mind. And the next is Collins Aerospace. Collins Aerospace, some of you may know, is one of the 4 divisions of Raytheon Technologies. Raytheon Technologies is a surviving organization that of a merger that took place of equals last year between United Technologies and Raytheon Aerospace. The surviving company was called Raytheon Technologies and broke up into 4 divisions. Collins Aerospace is one of them. Pratt & Whitney is another, their engine company. You've got missiles and defense and aerospace information and reconnaissance. So Collins is very, very important. They basically provide solutions in aviation, components, systems that help, as you see in the myriad number of space venues and products that are in use today. Collins is going to take about 8 acres. Excuse me. And they have an option for another 8 acres. What's really interesting about Collins that I want to share with you is they're going to build a 115,000 square foot building, manufacturing building. By the way, Axiom, when all is said and done, will be at 433,000. Beside the high bay hangar, they will have a maintenance, an actual manufacturing center. They will have a terminal to receive high wealth individuals who can afford to travel into space. And, you know, so I don't, you know, if you have to ask, as the old saying goes, you can't afford it. But I will tell you that when it comes to space, one thing that everyone does know is Virgin Galactic and Richard Branson, $250,000 for a ride into space. So, but over time, with technology, the price is going to come down, and pretty soon all of us will be able to go into space, and we'll be able to go into the International Space Center and take photos while we're, you know, going through what I talked about earlier. So you just have to wait for a little while, and it'll come. This is a rendering. Mr. Fred Griffith here and his partners have produced these drawings. It's going to be a really, really nice building, a very, very attractive building that everyone's going to be proud of. And the other thing about Collins is that they're going to add another 250 jobs. So you get 1,000. Oh, thank you so much. You have 1,000 from Collins, Action Space. You have another 250 from Collins, and I can't mention the name today, but there will be a third deal coming along for another 125,000 square feet of space, and probably another 250 jobs. So we're talking about 1,500 jobs in the span of 3 to 5 years from now. So more housing, more car sales, more Starbucks. You know, it makes perfect sense to me. I like this. The other thing about Collins that you should know is that as part of this 115,000 square feet of space that they're going to be building, they're going to be carving out 10,000 square feet for an accelerator. And they're not going to run it. They're going to turn that accelerator space over to us. And we'll be running it. Of course, they will be sponsoring to the extent that they can and mentoring possible small companies. But here's an opportunity for us to use the space that's being built, not just for a large organization like Collins to manufacture and use it, but also to act as a source, a mentor in space, to act as an accelerator. And that's significant. That is really meaningful and very important. What I want to leave you with is this idea of this training center. And as I said, a while back, we were in the hunt, not for Red October, but for Blue Origin. And we lost. We lost Huntsville, Alabama. And Sally Kane and Dan Seal and a number of us all said, we got to get to the bottom of this. We're going to go to Huntsville. So we walked our way into Huntsville and we said, hey, what's up? How did you guys win this? And they gave us the usual, well, we're good, we're the best, all that. But what we really learned was that made the difference to Blue Origin, aside from the 2S senators that will go unmentioned, was that the state of Alabama had given to Blue Origin a grant for $10 million to build a training center, a training facility. We couldn't match that. We didn't even know where to start. But we understood that that was foundational. It was fundamental. It was really, really important to companies. You know, you read in the newspapers and watch on TV every day announcement that there are 8 million jobs in the United States going begging because the employees don't have the skills. And we're going to get into aerospace. We got to fix that. But not only do we fix it, it gives us an advantage. Because in addition to talking to companies and saying, we have the capital, we have the land, and we have the regulatory environment, and we have the support of the community, and we have low taxation, we also got a trained labor force. Not only a trained labor force, but a labor force and a system that can adopt and accept your company and your needs and turn out a program tailored for training the employees that you must have today and tomorrow. And so what we did was we went to Wichita, Kansas, and we found out that was one of the examples. And I got to tell you, you talk about rivals. Now, Wichita, Kansas, you say, well, wait a minute, it's Wichita, Kansas. But again, they do some things really, really, really well. And one of the things that they do really well is they train in aerospace. And so when we went there, we saw this. We started to look at it, and we just realized they had things like exotic welding. How do you weld titanium or aluminum? How do you do gold? It's not easy, but you can get a certificate in Wichita, Kansas to do exactly that. And I think it takes like 9 months. It's $9,000. And as soon as the students come out with their certificates, they get snapped up. There are jobs waiting for them. Things like robotics. Robotics, I mean, look at the automobile industry these days, and when you look at the assembly line, all you see are robots, including the people that are just drilling, putting on a bolt. They're almost robots, and they will be replaced soon as well. So robotics is very important. Additive and deductive manufacturing. What is additive and deductive manufacturing? Well, deductive manufacturing is simple. You take a block of steel, a cube, you put it in this machine, you have to learn how to program it. You program the machine starts humming. You see all kinds of things taking place inside this glass. And 2, maybe 3 hours later, the shield lifts up, and out comes a perfectly formed and configured drill bit that you can put on the end of the shaft and start drilling for oil. That's deductive manufacturing. And additive manufacturing, of course, is printing. So how does that work in aerospace? Well, think about things that are very, very difficult to cut and to shape and form, like ceramics. But imagine if you can print a ceramic component, especially for the hot sections of an engine, because ceramics withstand heat very, very well. That's really important. Now, those are kinds of skills that these individuals can attain: industrial robotics, reverse engineering, advanced joining and processing, precision. Aerospace requires precision. I'll tell you, I'm speaking to Mr. Mike Sufadini of Axiom, and I said, so where are these shells you're bringing to Houston coming from? He goes, they're coming from Italy. I said, hey, why Italy? Oh, they get welded there. Well, we do welding. No. They get welded in Italy. I said, yeah, but we do welding. He goes, listen, Mario, they can't fail. We're in space. When you can show me that you can do welding as well as they do it in Italy, we'll bring that process to Houston. And I said, you're on. We're going to show you that through the training center that we set up here, that we stand up, the students that will learn to weld these exotic metals will be able to do a job that is equally, if not better, than what they do in Italy. And you will bring that work with those jobs to Houston, and that's going to make a difference as well. Carbon composite fabrication. Think about the wings and the hulls of aircraft these days. 787 Dreamliners, A350s, the A380s. They use aluminum less and less, and they use these very, very hard composites, graphite composites, carbon composites, because they can withstand greater pressures. And if the hull of an aircraft can withstand greater pressure, then you can maintain greater pressure at altitude. So instead of being at 8,000 feet, when you're above 18,000, you can maintain a cabin pressure of 5,000 or 7,000 feet. It makes it easier to breathe. And so over a long extended flight, you don't feel as fatigued when you exit the aircraft. And that's really important. So carbon composite fabrication is also very important. Welding and painting labs, as I've said. And that Edge Center will sit right in the middle. It'll be the anchor the hub of all of these companies all around that's really going to make Houston Spaceport, and the city of Houston, we think, when it's all set up. And by the way, we don't want this just to be a hands-on trade or crafts development organization. We want it to be a continuum. So yes, you start out with students and individuals that may want a certificate because, let's face it, not everyone can or should go to college. There are some very, very good paying jobs that don't require a 4-degree degree in engineering or mathematics or physics or anything else. And intelligence is not always spatial. It's not always logic intelligence. Sometimes intelligence has to do with what you can do with your hands. Think about athletes and the tremendous things they can do with their bodies. Or think about things that people get a sense of. Someone who walks through nature and just happens to notice all the different varieties of plants and animals that you might say you don't even see, you miss. That's a different form of intelligence. And again, so we start with these individuals that have a talent with their hands, but then what we'd like for them to do is, if they have the desire, if their interest, curiosity is piqued enough, they might want to say, you know, I really would like to understand how this works. And for that, like the doctors say, you need a 4-year degree. And so we transition them to our partners in the 4-year space of education. And we have laboratories for them to kind of develop ideas creatively. You never know what one of these students, we give them assignments, companies that have problems. Dave once took me to the design kitchen at Rice University. I was blown away. It's an amazing facility where students are basically given tasks, projects that they work on to solve problems for businesses. They've got all kinds of gadgets. I really wish when I was young, I had a place like that. I'd be in there every day. Transistors and all kinds of switches and pipes and things that put it all together. See if your idea works. I mean, that's the kind of creativity. That's how creativity gets done. When you can sit together with a bunch of people and you can throw ideas back and forth, and then you can say, okay, let's see if it works. Let's go outside and let's build it. Well, that's again what we'd be able to do at this center. Because if you have an idea and you've worked out the mathematics, you worked out the physics, you have a prototype design for what it would look like, you have the specifications, go out to the center and assign some students to build it for you. Have all the machinery, they have all of the techniques. And if it works, you move into the accelerator and you start a business, and the rest is history. You're really going to make it. And I think with that, I thank you and happy to take any questions you might have. Well, that's a little bit, I think Dr. Alexander would tell us, that's a little bit off on the distance. Hypersonic flight is still difficult to achieve. You know, that's 5 times or greater the speed of sound. So if you put that into some comparison, some of you remember the Blackbird, the SR-71, that flew at about, 3 times the speed of sound. I mean, it was faster than a bullet, but it was only at like 3 times the speed of sound. We're talking about 5 times the speed of sound. Now, the Russians claim to have a vehicle that will travel at 5 times the speed of sound, a rocket actually that will travel at 5 times the speed of sound. But I think with all these new techniques, that will eventually come, and you'll be talking about short times. Like, remember, the Concorde made a real difference across the Atlantic. Instead of 8 hours on the plane, you were able to make it in 4.5 hours. So it really does make a difference. And when we get to hypersonic flight, so imagine a trip between Houston and Singapore that you can go in the morning on United Airlines, right? And spend the day and then come back that evening. Singapore. It's a lot to look forward to. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Real quickly, and we'll leave. I just want to say something real quick. As long as I've been in this job, we've had 3 directors at the Houston Airport System. And I will say the only one that has ever paid attention to this region is Mario Diaz. So many times we were looked at as a hayfield out here. And Mario was the shining light. Now, I will say also, Saba Abashal discovered us a few years back, and she has always been a part of Ellington, and she's always tried to get people to pay attention to us. But it really took somebody like Mario to take over the Houston Airport System to realize what we really have here. We've always called it a diamond in the rough. Okay, with that, Mario, thank you for your comments. I want to thank everybody for being here today. It means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to the people sitting next to you for us all to be together again. So thank you.